Now, you've just watched a video about Apollo from the roof of the Temple of Ve. And before we move on, I just want to remind you and point out that we still might see some similarities and influences from the art of the Near East and from the archaic Greek period. For example, if you look at Apollo, there is this tremendous stylization to the drapery of the toga that he's wearing, and these sort of braided style of hair that he is sporting. If we look over at the some of the reliefs from the Apadana at Persepolis, we can see that perhaps this is coming from some of the tastes of the Near East. And if we look at a Kouros figure, we can also see some similarities in terms of the features of the face. He seems to have a bit of an archaic smile and these beautiful almond-shaped eyes that we also see on the Kouros, as well as that braided or beaded hairstyle. But to contrast them now, however, obviously, the Apollo is clothed, and we would never see a Kouros, a male Kouros, clothed. He also is in action in a way that is missing from the Kouros. Although the standing youth, the archaic Greek figure, is taking a stride forward, it's still very frontal, symmetric, and very Egyptian in that very purposeful stride forward. Apollo, however, seems more dynamic. He seems to be in action. He's kind of lifting off of that back foot and pushing onto the front foot in a way that isn't graceful, but rather has this kind of lurch to it. But we see with that arm that is, of course, broken out, it is striving forward. We see him reaching forward off into our space. And that's a real difference from the Kouros figure. So again, the Etruscans were certainly aware of both the art of the Near East and also were in contact with the Greeks of that era, which would have been the archaic Greek period. So much of what we know about the Etruscans actually come from their tombs that we find in cemeteries or a necropolis that have been left behind. Of course, we know something about their architecture from the writings of Vitruvius, but we have to imagine that. With the necropolis, we actually, in the cemeteries, we actually do have tombs that we can explore and give us a real window into what life might have been like for the Etruscans. I'm showing you here an aerial view of La Banditaccia necropolis in Severity, which is over here very close to Rome. And if you look at the aerial view, we can see these kind of bumps in the landscape that almost look like beehives. These are tombs that are part of this necropolis. And a necropolis is, if you remember from our Egyptian module, a city of the dead. And these were very much laid out like cities with streets and passageways. Each tomb kind of looks like a house that faces the street with a door that can be entered. They are circular structures that are covered with mounds of dirt and are often carved out of the living rock. With passages that enter into it, and the interiors are also carved out of the living rock. The interiors mimic the interiors of houses. So again, even though these are meant as resting places for the dead, we get a bit of a window into what life might have been like. From these cemeteries, we also learn that for the Etruscans, the afterlife was a very important concept. And in this way, they're fairly similar to the Egyptians in that they felt that the afterlife was very much a continuation of life. and therefore the deceased required items to allow them to live a comfortable life in the afterlife. A big difference, however, is that the Egyptians believed that in order to have a comfortable afterlife, the body needed to be preserved, and so they practiced mummification. The Etruscans, however, did not mummify their deceased and rather cremated them. But even though they did practice cremation, they still required a place where they could live comfortably in the afterlife. And so they constructed these tombs. Here's a close-up of the tumuli, which is the name of the tombs in Italian, the tumuli. And you can see they're rather large structures, circular in form, carved again out of the living rock, but then the roofs kind of have this kind of beehive shape, which is covered with dirt and overgrown. Here I'm showing you the interior of one of these tombs, and you can see even though they are circular from the outside, they are carved up into rooms or square-shaped rooms, and they are furnished with kind of relief furnishing that are also carved from the rock. So we'll often see benches or beds or kind of like banquettes or sofas and chairs that could be for seating. This one is called the Tomb of the Shields. So we see on the wall, again, mock shields that are carved right into the wall as reliefs. So they're meant to mimic shields in life that you could take off the walls, but here they are in low relief. Here is a plan of the Tomb of the Shields and chairs, so you could get a sense of those square-shaped rooms that almost has sort of a living room in the middle. This is a rectangular room, and then off to the side we have these bed chambers with these banquettes or beds and even stone carved pillows, and we'll see that in the next tomb. Probably the most famous of these tombs is called the Tomb of the Reliefs, and we get a lot of information from this interior. It is clearly the tomb of an elite because it is so heavily decorated. Many of them have some decorations, but nowhere near this amount of ornamentation. And the decoration consists of carved bedrock features that would have been stuccoed and painted. And we still see a bit of that pigment on the reliefs. The decorative program evokes the interior of an aristocratic household that is prepared to host a banquet or a drinking party. And the provisions include all sorts of things like cups and strainers that all seem to be hanging from pegs. And we see all of this stuff, all of these sort of kitchen appliances and ancient gadgets that you would need for cooking. Here we have a knife and we have a rope, we have pots and pans, we have vessels, there are still some shields, some helmets. All of the accoutrement of a social aristocratic household is provided in this low relief schema. What I love is not only do we have all of the possessions of this household, but even a pet here. And this looks like it might be a dog or maybe a weasel, but certainly there is some animation provided by this little critter that's here. Here's another view from a bit of a different angle, so you can see a few more of these objects that, again, don't exist, but are rather carved into the wall, like a pot or a strainer here, more knives, a hatchet, and again, the shields and helmets and weaponry of the people who lived here. Here's a view of that central niche of the rear wall that you saw in the previous slide. And from a close-up, you can see that this little bed where somebody could rest their head on what looks like a faux pillow, but it's actually rocks that are carved. We see some imagery that is appropriate for a funerary context. This is Cerberus, the three-headed dog. who exists in Greek culture as well as Etruscan culture. He was the guardian of the gates of the afterlife, or the underworld. So again, we have some imagery that implies the funerary context of this interior. All of these items, as I said, would have been carved out of the rock and then painted vibrantly to really give the sense of a comfortable home, a home for a Etruscan aristocrat. Some of it would have been carved not just out of rock, but out of stucco, which is a slow-drying plaster that could be then carved and painted to make some of the objects. Etruscan scholars believe that these tombs were really meant to recreate the feeling of a home. And the people that would have been placed here, their remains would have been placed here, not just the families and the immediate families, but also the extended families. So this is, there's some differences here from the Egyptian tombs. First of all, the Egyptian tombs would have been meant to hold the mummified remains. They would have only meant to have been for the immediate family and not the extended family. And they also imagined actual objects, not simulated objects, but actual objects that would have been used in the afterlife. In the afterlife. For the Etruscans, because all of these things are fake, they are simulated, there's almost a conceptual vision of what the afterlife might be. We are imagining what the afterlife would be like for our loved ones, rather than imagining them actually going through the motions of everyday life in this space. We also have some rooms with vibrantly painted frescoes in which we see figures that are kind of carrying on the festivities of life in the afterlife. They are lying down, reclining at a banquet, being served by servants. They're being served wine and grapes, all in this space that seems very lively, that seems very festive. So, in other words, for the Etruscans, the afterlife was just a continuation of the party that they were having in life.